I knew something was wrong the moment I pulled into my driveway at Meadowbrook Estates in Columbus, Ohio, and saw Deborah standing next to my car with my ice scraper in her hand. It was 6 in the morning. The temperature was hovering around 15 degrees, and a fresh layer of ice coated everything from the trees to the mailboxes. I had just gotten back from an emergency overnight shift at the hospital where I worked as a surgical tech, and all I wanted was to park my car, get inside my house, and collapse into bed. Instead, I was watching the president of our homeowners association inspect my ice scraper like it was evidence in a criminal investigation. I am Harrison O'Brien, 32 years old, and I had been living in this nightmare of a planned community for exactly 8 months. When my wife left me the previous year, I sold our house in the suburbs and bought a modest 3-bedroom ranch here, thinking a fresh start in a quiet neighborhood would help me rebuild my life. What I did not know was that Meadowbrook Estates came with Deborah Patterson, a 53-year-old woman who treated the HOA rules like they were carved into stone tablets and handed down from a divine authority. I climbed out of my truck, my scrubs still on under my winter coat, and walked toward her. "Deborah, that's my ice scraper. Why do you have it?" She turned to face me, her lips pressed into that familiar thin line of disapproval. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful, and she wore a puffy North Face jacket over what I assumed were her usual pressed slacks. "Harrison, I confiscated this because you left it on your dashboard in plain view." Section 12, Paragraph 4 of our community guidelines states that no personal items may be visible through vehicle windows when parked in driveways. It creates visual clutter and diminishes property values. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline that never came. "You are joking." "I most certainly am not. I have been documenting violations all morning, and yours was particularly egregious. This scraper was clearly visible from the street." She held it up like a prosecutor presenting Exhibit A. It was my favorite ice scraper, a sturdy one with a foam grip that my dad had given me years ago. It even had a brush on one end for sweeping off snow. "Deborah, it is an ice scraper, in my car, during winter. Where else would I keep it? In your trunk where it belongs." The glove compartment would also be acceptable. She tucked the scraper under her arm. "I will be keeping this as evidence for the violation notice you will receive within 3 business days. You will also be fined $75 for non-compliance." The exhaustion from my 12-hour shift evaporated, replaced by a surge of anger that made my hands shake. "Give me back my ice scraper." "No. As HOA president, I have the authority to confiscate items related to violations." "You will receive this back after you have paid your fine and submitted a written plan detailing how you will prevent future violations." She started walking toward her house 3 doors down, my ice scraper still tucked under her arm like a football. I stood there in my driveway, watching her go, and something in me snapped. I had dealt with Deborah's nonsense for 8 months. She had fined me for leaving my trash cans out 15 minutes past the designated time. She had sent me a formal letter about the shade of mulch in my flower beds being 1 tone too dark according to approved color standards. She had personally measured the height of my grass with a ruler and documented that it exceeded the maximum allowed length by ½ an inch. But this, stealing my property under the guise of HOA authority, was too far. I waited until she disappeared into her house, then I walked down the sidewalk and right up to her driveway. Her silver Lexus sat there, completely covered in ice. The temperature had dropped overnight, and freezing rain had coated everything. Her car looked like it had been dipped in glass. I could see her moving around inside her house through the front window, probably filing paperwork about my violation. My ice scraper sat on her front porch, balanced on top of a cardboard box filled with what looked like more HOA documents. I walked up her porch steps, grabbed my scraper, and walked back to my house. The whole thing took maybe 30 seconds. I figured if she was going to steal my property, I would simply take it back. Problem solved. I was wrong about the problem being solved. At 7:30 that morning, my doorbell rang. I had managed maybe 40 minutes of sleep, and I stumbled to the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, my eyes barely open. Deborah stood there with her phone in her hand, her face red with either cold or anger or both. "You stole from me," she said, not even bothering with a greeting. "I took back my own ice scraper that you stole from me," I corrected her. "I confiscated it legally under HOA authority. You committed theft by taking it from my property." She held up her phone. "I have you on my Ring camera. I am calling the police." "Go ahead," I said, too tired to care. "Tell them you stole my ice scraper out of my car and I took it back. Let's see what they say." Her finger hovered over her phone screen. "This is not over, Harrison. You have violated multiple HOA bylaws, and I will make sure you face the consequences." She turned and marched back down my walkway. I closed the door and leaned against it, realizing I had probably just escalated things in a way I would regret. But I was beyond caring at that moment. I went back to bed and slept until 2 in the afternoon. When I finally woke up and checked my phone, I had 7 missed calls from numbers I did not recognize, and 4 emails from the Meadowbrook Estates, HOA. The emails detailed a litany of new violations I had apparently committed, including disturbing the peace, trespassing on HOA board member property, and theft of confiscated materials. The fines totaled $350, and I was being summoned to an emergency HOA meeting scheduled for that evening at 7. I sat on my couch, reading through the emails twice to make sure I understood correctly. Deborah had not called the police like she threatened, but she had done something arguably worse. She had mobilized the entire HOA board against me. The emergency meeting was specifically about my behavior and whether I should face additional sanctions, including possible legal action from the HOA. I called my neighbor, Marcus, who lived across the street. He was a retired attorney who had warned me about Deborah when I first moved in. "Marcus, I need advice." "Let me guess, Deborah, how did you know?" "Because she was knocking on doors this morning, telling everyone you broke into her house and threatened her." My stomach dropped. "That is completely false. I took back my ice scraper from her porch. I never went inside her house or threatened anyone." "I know, Harrison. I saw the whole thing from my window. I was up early having coffee. But Deborah has been telling a very different story to anyone who will listen." He paused. "Are you going to the meeting tonight?" "I guess I have to." "Let me come with you. You are going to need someone on your side." That evening, I walked into the community center at Meadowbrook Estates with Marcus beside me. The room was set up like a courtroom, with a long table at the front where Deborah sat with 4 other board members. Folding chairs faced them in neat rows, and about 20 of my neighbors had shown up to watch. The energy in the room felt hostile, and I realized Deborah had been working hard all day to turn people against me. Deborah called the meeting to order, banging a gavel on the table like she was a judge. "We are here tonight to address serious violations committed by Harrison O'Brien of 847 Maple Drive. Harrison has shown a pattern of disregard for our community standards, culminating in today's incident where he trespassed on my property and stole materials that had been legally confiscated." I raised my hand. "Can I speak?" "You will have an opportunity to address the board after we present the evidence," Deborah said coldly. For the next 20 minutes, Deborah presented a slideshow on a projector screen. It showed photos of my house from various angles, highlighting supposed violations. My trash cans in the wrong spot, my grass slightly too long, a garden hose visible from the street, my ice scraper on my dashboard. Then she played the Ring camera footage of me taking my ice scraper from her porch. She narrated over it like I was committing armed robbery instead of retrieving my own property. As you can see, Harrison approached my home with clear intent to steal. He showed no regard for private property or HOA authority. This behavior is unacceptable and creates an unsafe environment for all residents. She turned off the projector and looked at me. "Now you may speak." I stood up, very aware that everyone was staring at me. "First, that ice scraper is mine. It belonged to my father before he passed away, and it has sentimental value. Deborah took it from my car without my permission this morning, claiming it was an HOA violation to have it visible on my dashboard. I find that rule ridiculous, but even if it is a real rule, taking someone's property is theft." "It was confiscated, not stolen," Deborah interrupted. "Deborah, you do not have legal authority to confiscate people's property. You are not a police officer. You took something that belonged to me, and I took it back. That is not theft. That is recovering my own belongings." One of the other board members, an older man named Gerald, cleared his throat. "The bylaws do give the HOA president authority to document violations and hold evidence." "Hold evidence?" I could not keep the disbelief out of my voice. "It is an ice scraper, not a murder weapon. And even if we pretend that rule is reasonable, Deborah told everyone I broke into her house and threatened her, which is a complete lie. I never went inside her house. I took my scraper from her porch and left. That is it." Marcus stood up beside me. "I witnessed the entire incident from my window. Harrison's account is accurate. He approached the porch, retrieved his property, and left. No threats, no break-in." "I would be happy to provide a statement to that effect." Deborah's face flushed. "Marcus, you are not a part of these proceedings. Actually, as a homeowner in this community, I have every right to attend and speak at HOA meetings. It says so in the bylaws you love to quote." Marcus pulled out his phone. "I also took a video this morning. Would you like me to show it to everyone?" The room got very quiet. Deborah looked at the other board members, and I could see uncertainty on their faces. "That will not be necessary. The point is that Harrison has shown a pattern of violations and disrespect for community standards." "The point," I said, raising my voice, "is that you have been harassing me for 8 months over ridiculous things, and this morning you finally crossed a line. You do not get to steal people's property and then play victim when they take it back. This meeting is about addressing your violations, not attacking me," Deborah said, banging her gavel. "The board will now vote on sanctions. I propose a fine of $500 and mandatory attendance at community standards education sessions." "I propose we drop this entire charade," Marcus said. Deborah overstepped her authority. Harrison responded reasonably, and we are all wasting our time. The other 4 board members looked uncomfortable. Gerald spoke up again. "Perhaps we should table this until we can review the bylaws more carefully regarding confiscation procedures." "There is nothing to review," Deborah insisted. "The bylaws are clear." A woman in the audience raised her hand. I recognized her as Janet, who lived a few houses down from me. "I have a question. If Deborah can confiscate an ice scraper, what else can she take? My kids leave toys in our yard sometimes. Can she confiscate those too?" Another man spoke up. "I keep a coffee mug in my car. Is that a violation?" Suddenly, the room erupted in questions and concerns. People started talking over each other, and I realized that Deborah's overreach had made everyone nervous about their own potential violations. She banged her gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order, but the meeting was falling apart. Finally, Gerald stood up. I motioned to end this meeting and form a committee to review HOA enforcement procedures. All in favor. 3 of the 4 board members raised their hands immediately. Deborah sat there, outvoted, her face like stone. The meeting was adjourned and people filed out, many stopping to talk to Marcus and me. They shared their own horror stories about Deborah, and I realized I was not alone in my frustration. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong again. The next morning, I woke up to find my car completely buried in snow. Except it had not snowed overnight. Someone had shoveled snow from the surrounding yards and piled it on my car. It covered the hood, the roof, the trunk, everything. There must have been 3 feet of snow packed around and on top of my vehicle. I stood in my driveway in my bathrobe and boots, staring at this mountain of snow, and I knew exactly who was responsible. I looked down the street at Deborah's house. Her driveway and walkway were perfectly clear. Her car was clean, and she was standing in her front window watching me. I pulled out my phone and took pictures from every angle. Then I started the long process of digging out my car. It took me an hour and a half, and by the time I finished, I was sweating despite the cold. My back ached, my arms felt like jelly, and I was late for work. At the hospital, my colleague Sarah noticed I was in a bad mood. "What happened to you?" I told her the whole story, from the ice scraper incident to the HOA meeting to the snow burial. She listened with increasing disbelief. "That is insane. You should call the police." "And tell them what? Someone put snow on my car, they will laugh at me." "It is harassment, Harrison. Document everything. Take pictures, save emails, keep records. If she keeps escalating, you will need evidence." Sarah was right, but I hoped it would not come to that. I was wrong for the 3rd time. Over the next 2 weeks, Deborah launched a campaign of petty harassment that would have been impressive if it was not so exhausting. She filed a complaint with the city saying I was running a business from my home, which resulted in a code enforcement officer showing up to inspect. I had to take time off work to prove I was not running any kind of business. She reported my truck for being parked on the street overnight, even though I had parked in my driveway. The parking enforcement officer was confused, but still wrote me a warning. She sent letters to all my neighbors warning them that I was a disruptive presence and suggesting they avoid contact with me. The letters were what finally pushed me to fight back. Marcus brought me a copy that had been delivered to his house. It was typed on official HOA letterhead and described me as potentially dangerous, citing the supposed break-in and theft. It was full of lies and implications that could damage my reputation in the community. I took the letter to a lawyer named Patricia Chen, who specialized in HOA disputes. She read through everything I had documented, including emails, photos, and witness statements from Marcus. "This is defamation," she said. "She is making false statements about you in writing and distributing them to your neighbors. You have grounds for a lawsuit." "I just want her to stop," I said. "I do not want to sue anyone. I just want to live in my house in peace. Then let me send her a cease and desist letter. If she continues after that, we can pursue legal action." Patricia drafted a letter that afternoon, outlining how Deborah's behavior constituted harassment and defamation, and warning her of legal consequences if it continued. She sent it certified mail. Deborah received the letter 3 days later. I know because she showed up at my door 20 minutes after signing for it, waving the envelope in my face. "You are threatening me with a lawsuit, after everything you have done." "I have not done anything except try to live in my house," I said, keeping my voice calm. You are the one who has been harassing me for months. Harassing you. I am enforcing community standards that everyone agreed to when they bought property here. No, you are using the HOA as an excuse to bully people, and I am not the only one who thinks so. Talk to Janet or the Millers or anyone else you have targeted. I will not stand here and be insulted. She turned to leave, then spun back around. You have made a serious mistake, Harrison. You do not want me as an enemy. I never wanted you as anything, I said. I just wanted you to leave me alone. She left, and I closed the door, my hands shaking. I called Patricia and told her about the confrontation. Good, she said. Let her be angry. The letter puts her on notice. If she retaliates in any way, we have even more evidence of harassment. For a few days, things were quiet. I almost relaxed. Then on Sunday morning, I went outside to get my newspaper and found my mailbox knocked over. It was lying in my yard, bent and twisted, clearly hit by something heavy. I looked around and saw tire tracks in the frost on my lawn, leading from the street across my grass to where the mailbox had stood. I called the police this time. An officer came out, took a report, and examined the tire tracks. Looks like someone hit it deliberately, he said. These tracks show they drove onto your property, not just swerved from the road. Do you have any idea who might have done this? I hesitated. I had no proof it was Deborah, but I also had no doubt. I am in a dispute with my HOA president. She has been harassing me. The officer took notes. Has she made any threats? She said I made a mistake and that I did not want her as an enemy. That is pretty vague, but I will include it in the report. In the meantime, if you have security cameras, now would be a good time to install them. I took his advice. That afternoon, I drove to an electronics store and bought a set of wireless security cameras. I spent the evening installing them around my property, covering my driveway, front door, and backyard. If Deborah tried anything else, I would have evidence. The cameras proved their worth faster than I expected. 2 nights later, at 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I grabbed it and opened the security app, watching a live feed of someone creeping around my front yard. The figure was bundled in winter clothes, but the street light caught enough detail for me to see it was a woman. She was carrying something in her hands, moving toward my front door. I jumped out of bed and looked out my window, but she was on the side of the house where I could not see from my bedroom. I watched on my phone as she bent down and placed something on my front step, then hurried back to the street. A car was parked at the curb with its lights off. She got in and drove away, and the camera caught a clear shot of her license plate. I went downstairs and turned on my porch light, then opened my front door carefully. Sitting on my doormat was a dead rat. Not a mouse, a full-sized rat, clearly not killed recently based on the smell. It was a message, meant to intimidate or disgust me. I took pictures, then used a plastic bag to pick it up and put it in my outside trash can. I went back inside and immediately called Patricia Chen's emergency number. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding groggy. This better be important. Someone just left a dead rat on my doorstep and I got it on camera. She was suddenly alert. Tell me you can identify who it was. I got the license plate of the car. I read it off to her. Email me the video right now, then call the police and file a report. This is criminal harassment, Harrison. This is not HOA nonsense anymore. I called the police again. The same officer from the mailbox incident came out, and this time he took the situation much more seriously. Leaving dead animals on someone's property is intimidation. Combined with the previous incidents, this establishes a pattern of harassment. He watched the video on his laptop in my living room. Can you see the person's face? Not clearly, but I can see it is a woman and I have the license plate. Let me run it. He called it in, and a few minutes later he had information. Vehicle is registered to Deborah Patterson. He looked up at me. Your HOA president? Yes. Have you filed a restraining order? Not yet. My attorney sent her a cease and desist letter last week. He nodded. Based on this evidence and the pattern of behavior, I would recommend filing for a restraining order tomorrow morning. I am going to go talk to Miss Patterson right now. Wait here. I watched from my window as the officer drove down to Deborah's house and knocked on her door. Lights came on and eventually she appeared, wearing a robe. They talked on her porch for about 10 minutes. Even from a distance, I could see she was agitated, gesturing emphatically. The officer remained calm, showing her something on his phone, probably the video. Finally, she went back inside and he returned to his car and drove back to my house. She denies it was her, he said. Claims her car was parked in her driveway all night and someone must have stolen her plates or you faked the video. But I could see her car in the driveway and the front end was still warm. The engine block holds heat for a while after driving. She used that car recently. What happens now? I am filing a report for criminal harassment and intimidation. The prosecutor's office will review it. In the meantime, file for that restraining order. A judge will take this seriously given the evidence. He handed me a case number. Keep recording everything. If she contacts you or comes near your property again, call us immediately. After he left, I could not sleep. I sat in my living room watching the security camera feeds until sunrise, expecting Deborah to come back. She did not. But at 8 in the morning, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. Harrison O'Brien. A woman's voice, not Deborah. Yes, my name is Cheryl Phillips. I live in Meadowbrook Estates over on Oak Street. I heard about what is happening with Deborah Patterson and I need to talk to you. Okay. Not on the phone. Can we meet somewhere? A coffee shop maybe? I agreed to meet her at a Starbucks near the neighborhood in an hour. When I arrived, I recognized Cheryl from HOA meetings, though we had never spoken directly. She was in her early 40s, with dark hair and tired eyes. She was already sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. I got you a regular coffee. I hope that is okay, she said as I sat down. It is fine. What is this about? She looked around like she was worried someone might overhear, even though the coffee shop was mostly empty. Deborah did the same thing to me 2 years ago. The harassment, the violations, all of it. It got so bad I almost sold my house and moved. What happened? I accidentally planted flowers that were not on the approved list. I did not even know there was an approved list. Deborah came by and told me I had to remove them immediately. When I said I would do it the next weekend, she filed a violation and fined me $100. I got upset and told her I thought she was being unreasonable. Cheryl took a sip of her coffee, her hands shaking slightly. After that, it was like I became her project. She found violations for everything. My house number was half an inch too small according to some obscure rule. My fence was the wrong shade of white. My car was parked 6 inches over the line of my driveway pad. The fines kept coming and then she started the other stuff. What other stuff? Someone kept dumping trash in my yard. My tires were slashed twice. I got anonymous letters calling me terrible names. It went on for months. I filed police reports, but I never had proof it was her. Eventually, I just paid all the fines and stopped going to HOA meetings. I stayed quiet and kept my head down, and eventually she moved on to someone else. Why are you telling me this? Because you are fighting back, and I should have. I talked to Janet and the Millers and some other people. We all have stories about Deborah. She has been terrorizing this neighborhood for years, and the board just lets her do it because they are scared of her. Cheryl reached across the table and put her hand on mine. We want to help you. If you are serious about stopping her, we will testify about what she has done. We will support you at HOA meetings, whatever you need." I felt something loosen in my chest. I just want her to leave me alone. I do not want to be a crusader. I know. But sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. And if we all stand together, she cannot pick us off one by one anymore. We talked for another hour. Cheryl gave me contact information for 6 other homeowners who had been harassed by Deborah. She also told me something I had not known. Deborah had been HOA president for 7 years, which was actually against the bylaws. Presidents were supposed to serve 2-year terms with a maximum of 2 consecutive terms. But no one had ever challenged her because she controlled the election process. That afternoon, I called Patricia Chen and told her everything Cheryl had shared. "This is good," Patricia said. "If we can establish a pattern of abuse of power, we can potentially remove her from the HOA board entirely. But it is going to require multiple people willing to come forward. I think I can get them. Then let us file that restraining order today and start building a case. In the meantime, keep your cameras running and do not engage with her at all." The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, I reached out to everyone Cheryl had mentioned. 5 of them agreed to write statements about their experiences with Deborah. Janet agreed to come to the hearing as a witness. Marcus offered to testify about what he had observed. I compiled everything into a folder that grew thicker each day: violation notices, harassing letters, emails, photos, videos, and witness statements. The morning of the hearing, I met Patricia at the courthouse in downtown Columbus. It was a gray, cold day that matched my mood. I was nervous about seeing Deborah again, even in a controlled setting. Patricia must have sensed it because she put a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You have done everything right. You have evidence, you have witnesses, and you have the law on your side. She is the one who should be nervous." We went through security and found the correct courtroom. Deborah was already there with her own attorney, a stern-looking man in an expensive suit. She glared at me as I walked in, and I looked away, focusing on Patricia instead. The judge, an older woman named Judge Martinez, called the hearing to order. "We are here regarding a petition for a restraining order filed by Harrison O'Brien against Deborah Patterson. Mr. O'Brien, your attorney may present the case." Patricia stood and walked through everything methodically. She showed the video of the dead rat being left on my porch. She presented the defamatory letters Deborah had sent to neighbors. She called Marcus to testify about witnessing the ice scraper incident and Deborah's subsequent lies about it. She called Janet to testify about her own experiences with Deborah's harassment. The whole presentation took almost an hour, and by the end, Judge Martinez was frowning deeply. "Miss Patterson, does your attorney wish to respond?" Deborah's attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client is the president of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA and was simply carrying out her duties to enforce community standards. Mr. O'Brien has shown a pattern of non-compliance and hostility toward legitimate authority. The video he presented could have been fabricated, and there is no proof my client was driving that vehicle. The police officer who responded testified that the engine was warm when he examined it at 3:30 in the morning," Judge Martinez said. "And I have reviewed the video. The license plate is clearly visible. Does Miss Patterson claim her vehicle was stolen that night?" The attorney hesitated. "No, Your Honor, but then who else would have been driving it? Does anyone else have access to that vehicle? My client occasionally loans her car to friends." "At 3 in the morning, to deliver dead rats to people's homes." Judge Martinez looked at Deborah directly. "Miss Patterson, I am troubled by what I have seen here today." The evidence suggests a systematic campaign of harassment against Mr. O'Brien and potentially other residents of your community. This goes far beyond enforcing HOA rules. Deborah stood up, even though her attorney tried to stop her. Your Honor, Harrison O'Brien has been a disruptive presence in our community from the moment he moved in. He flaunts our rules, he disrespects authority, and he has turned other residents against the HOA. I have only been trying to maintain the standards that keep our property values high. By leaving dead animals on his doorstep, by sending defamatory letters about him, by allegedly destroying his mailbox. Judge Martinez shook her head. Sit down, Miss Patterson. I have heard enough. Deborah sat, her face bright red. Judge Martinez reviewed some papers on her desk. I am granting the restraining order. Miss Patterson, you are to stay at least 100 yards away from Mr. O'Brien and his property at all times. You are not to contact him directly or indirectly, including through third parties. You are not to send him letters, emails, or any other communication. This order is effective immediately and will remain in place for 1 year, at which point Mr. O'Brien may petition for an extension if needed. She looked up. Furthermore, I am troubled enough by this case that I am referring it to the prosecutor's office for potential criminal charges. Harassment, intimidation, and vandalism are serious offenses. Deborah's attorney tried to object, but Judge Martinez cut him off. We are done here. Bailiff, please provide Mr. O'Brien with a certified copy of this order. As we left the courtroom, I felt like I could breathe properly for the first time in weeks. Patricia was pleased with the outcome. That went better than I expected. The judge took it very seriously. What happens now with the criminal charges? The prosecutor will review the evidence and decide whether to file charges. Given what we presented, I would say there is a good chance, but that process can take time. She paused. In the meantime, you should probably attend the next HOA meeting. With a restraining order in place, Deborah cannot legally be in the same room as you, which means if you show up, she has to leave. I had not thought of that. Really. She has to maintain 100 yards distance at all times. If there is an HOA meeting in the community center and you are there, she cannot enter. And if she is already there and you arrive, she has to leave. Patricia smiled. It is time to take your community back. The next HOA meeting was 2 weeks away. I spent that time talking to my neighbors, sharing what had happened at the hearing, and organizing. Cheryl helped coordinate everything. By the time the meeting date arrived, we had 22 homeowners ready to call for a vote of no confidence in Deborah and demand new elections for the board. I arrived at the community center 15 minutes early. Deborah was already there, sitting at the board table, sorting through papers. When she saw me walk in, her face went white, then red. She stood up, gathering her things. You cannot be here, she said. Actually, I can. You cannot be here. Not within 100 yards of me. That is what the restraining order says. I walked to the front row and sat down. So you need to leave. This is an official HOA meeting. I am the president. And you are also legally required to stay away from me. So you have a choice. Leave now, or I call the police and you get arrested for violating a court order. I pulled out my phone to show I was serious. The other board members were arriving and looking confused. Gerald spoke up. What is going on? Harrison has a restraining order against me, and he is using it to prevent me from doing my duties as president, Deborah said. No, I am using it to protect myself from someone who has harassed and threatened me for months. The judge agreed with me. Now you need to leave. I started dialing 911. Deborah grabbed her bag and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The room erupted in conversation. Gerald banged the gavel, trying to restore order. Everyone please calm down. We need to proceed with the meeting. Actually, Marcus said, standing up, we have a motion to make before we proceed with regular business. I move that we hold an immediate vote of no confidence in Deborah Patterson as HOA president, based on her abuse of power and harassment of community residents. I second the motion, Janet called out. Gerald looked uncomfortable. This is highly irregular. We should wait for Deborah to be present. She cannot be present because of the restraining order, I said, which is a direct result of her own actions. We can either hold the vote now, or we can cancel this meeting and reschedule it, at which point the same issue will arise. Your choice. The other board members huddled together, conferring in whispers. Finally, Gerald spoke. Very well, we will hold the vote. All homeowners in favor of a vote of no confidence in Deborah Patterson as HOA president, say aye. The response was overwhelming. 22 voices called out aye, filling the room with sound. Only 3 people voted against it. Deborah was officially removed as HOA president. We will need to hold new elections within 30 days according to the bylaws, Gerald said. He looked shaken, like he could not quite believe what had just happened. In the meantime, as vice president, I will assume the presidential duties. I have another motion, Cheryl said, standing up. I move that we conduct a full review of all HOA fines and violations issued in the past 5 years, with the goal of rescinding unjust or excessive penalties. Seconded, someone called out. And I move that we revise our enforcement procedures to prevent this kind of abuse of power from happening again. Another homeowner added, including term limits for board positions and oversight of the president's actions. For the next hour, we discussed reforms and changes. It felt like a dam had broken. People who had been silent for years spoke up about their frustrations. Ideas flowed about how to make the HOA actually serve the community instead of terrorizing it. By the end of the meeting, we had formed 3 committees to handle different aspects of reform, and Gerald had agreed to call a special election for the following month. As people filed out, many stopped to thank me. You did what the rest of us were too scared to do, an older man told me. You stood up to her. I just wanted my ice scraper back, I said, which got a laugh. Walking home that night, I felt lighter than I had in months. My mailbox had been fixed. My house was my own again, and Deborah could not come near me, but I should have known it was not over yet. 3 days later, I got a call from Detective Williams from the Columbus Police Department. Mr. O'Brien, this is regarding your harassment complaint against Deborah Patterson. Can you come to the station to answer some questions? Of course. When? Today, if possible. We have been investigating, and some new information has come to light. I drove to the police station, wondering what new information they could have found. Detective Williams met me in the lobby and led me back to an interview room. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s with gray hair and a tired face. Thank you for coming in, he said, sitting across from me. I have been reviewing your case, and I wanted to update you on where we are. First, we obtained Miss Patterson's phone records. She has been making calls to your employer, the hospital, trying to get you fired. My stomach dropped. What? She called the HR department multiple times, claiming you were unstable and dangerous, that you had threatened her, that you were under investigation for theft. All false statements. We contacted the hospital, and they confirmed they received these calls but did not take action because they know you and found the claims unbelievable. He slid a paper across the table. We have also been talking to other residents of Meadowbrook Estates. Your Miss Patterson has quite a history. I looked at the paper. It was a list of incidents involving Deborah going back 8 years. Harassment complaints, vandalism reports, intimidation allegations. There were at least 20 different victims listed. Why was nothing done before? I asked. Most people did not press charges. They either moved away or, like your neighbor Cheryl, they backed down and tried to avoid further conflict. You are the first person to pursue this formally with evidence. Detective Williams leaned back in his chair. But here is where it gets interesting. We obtained a warrant to search Miss Patterson's home based on the dead rat incident. We found some troubling things. Like what? She had files on dozens of residents. Photos, notes about their schedules, lists of potential violations. It was like she was running surveillance on the entire neighborhood. We also found paint that matches the paint used to vandalize several homes over the past few years, including some spray-painted messages on garage doors. And we found tools that match the damage pattern on your mailbox. I stared at him. She was behind all of that. We believe so. We are still processing evidence, but it is looking like Miss Patterson has been engaged in a years-long campaign of harassment and intimidation against multiple residents. This goes way beyond HOA enforcement. He paused. The prosecutor has decided to file criminal charges. She is being charged with stalking, harassment, intimidation, vandalism, and attempted interference with employment. Those are all serious charges that carry potential jail time. When will she be arrested? She was arrested this morning. She is being arraigned this afternoon. I wanted to talk to you first because you are the primary complainant, and you may be called to testify if this goes to trial. He pulled out a business card. This is the assistant prosecutor handling the case. She will be in touch with you soon. I left the police station in a daze. Deborah arrested, criminal charges, potential jail time. It all felt surreal. I called Patricia Chen from my car and told her everything. I am not surprised, she said. People like Deborah do not stop at reasonable limits, they escalate. I am glad the police took it seriously. She paused. You should also know that several other residents have reached out to me about filing a civil lawsuit against her for harassment and emotional distress. It could be a class action case. Are you interested in joining? I just want this to be over. I understand, but think about it. She needs to face consequences for what she has done, not just to you but to everyone. Otherwise, she will just find another neighborhood to terrorize once this is over. Patricia was right, but I was exhausted. The fight had taken everything out of me. Let me think about it, I said. Over the next few weeks, the case against Deborah moved forward. The prosecutor's office built a comprehensive case using evidence from multiple victims. I had to give a deposition, which took most of a day. I recounted everything from the ice scraper incident to the dead rat to the attempted interference with my job. Other residents gave their own depositions. The evidence was overwhelming. Deborah's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor was not interested in going easy on her. She terrorized an entire neighborhood for years. The assistant prosecutor told me during one of our conversations. She used her position of authority to abuse people and then tried to destroy anyone who stood up to her. We want to send a message that this behavior has serious consequences. The trial was set for 3 months later. In the meantime, Meadowbrook Estates held new HOA elections. Gerald chose not to run, saying he was retiring from the board. Cheryl ran for president and won easily. Marcus joined the board as treasurer. Other new faces filled the remaining positions. The whole board was refreshed with people who actually wanted to serve the community instead of controlling it. One of Cheryl's first acts as president was to rescind almost all the fines Deborah had issued over the past 5 years. Thousands of dollars in penalties were wiped away. She also rewrote the enforcement procedures to include checks and balances, appeals processes, and reasonable limits on what could be considered a violation. The approved plant list was thrown out. The rules about what could be visible in car windows were eliminated. Common sense returned to Meadowbrook Estates. My life slowly returned to normal. I went back to working my shifts at the hospital without worrying about what Deborah might do while I was gone. I kept my ice scraper on my dashboard where it belonged, and no one bothered me about it. I even planted some unapproved flowers in my front yard, just because I could. The trial began on a Monday morning in late spring. The courthouse was packed with residents from Meadowbrook Estates who had come to watch. Deborah sat at the defense table looking smaller somehow, diminished. The confident, imperious woman who had ruled the HOA with an iron fist was gone, replaced by someone who would not make eye contact with anyone. The prosecution presented a devastating case. They called witness after witness, each telling stories of harassment, intimidation, and abuse. They showed the video of the dead rat. They presented the files Deborah had kept on residents. They brought in handwriting experts who matched her writing to anonymous threatening letters. They showed paint samples that linked her to vandalism. The evidence piled up day after day. Deborah's defense was weak. Her attorney tried to argue that she was just a dedicated HOA president who took her responsibilities seriously, and that she was being persecuted for trying to maintain community standards. But it fell flat. The jury could see through it. This was not about HOA enforcement. This was about power and control and what happens when someone is given authority without accountability. I testified on the fourth day of the trial. I told the story of the ice scraper, the harassment that followed, the threats, and the escalating intimidation. The prosecutor asked me how it had affected my life. I was afraid in my own home, I said. I could not sleep because I was worried about what she might do next. I installed security cameras because I did not feel safe. I nearly lost my job because of her false reports. And all of it started because I had an ice scraper visible on my dashboard. I looked at Deborah for the first time. She was staring at the table. She took something that should have been a minor issue and turned it into a nightmare, and I know I am not the only one. She did this to dozens of people over the years. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman read the verdict, guilty on all counts. Stalking, harassment, intimidation, vandalism, and attempted interference with employment. Deborah showed no emotion as the verdict was read, but her attorney's shoulders slumped. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. The judge, the same Judge Martinez who had granted my restraining order, heard statements from victims before imposing sentence. 12 people spoke about what Deborah had done to them and how it had affected their lives. Some cried. Some were angry. All of them were relieved that she was finally being held accountable. When it was my turn, I kept it brief. I moved to Meadowbrook Estates to start over after my divorce. I wanted a quiet place to rebuild my life. Instead, I found myself in a battle with someone who saw me as a threat to her power. I hope this sentence sends a message that HOA boards are meant to serve communities, not rule them. And I hope Deborah gets the help she clearly needs. Judge Martinez sentenced Deborah to 18 months in jail, followed by 3 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay restitution to all her victims, covering the fines she had illegally imposed and damages for harassment. She was banned from serving on any HOA board in the future. As the bailiff led her away, she finally looked at me. There was no anger in her eyes, just emptiness. Outside the courthouse, reporters wanted to talk to me. The story had gained attention as an example of HOA abuse gone wrong. I give a brief statement about hoping for reform in how HOAs operate and the need for accountability. Then I went home. That evening, I sat on my back deck with a beer, looking out at my yard. My flowers were blooming. My grass was whatever height it happened to be, and no one cared. My ice scraper was on my dashboard where I could grab it easily on cold mornings. Everything was exactly as it should be. Marcus came over with his wife and brought steaks to grill. Cheryl and Janet stopped by with wine. Other neighbors drifted over as word spread that we were having an impromptu gathering. Before long, my backyard was full of people laughing and talking and celebrating. It felt like a weight had been lifted from the entire community. "To Harrison," Marcus said, raising his beer bottle, "for having the courage to fight back." "To Harrison and his ice scraper," Janet added, which got a big laugh. I raised my own bottle. "To common sense and good neighbors, and to never letting anyone steal what is ours, whether that is an ice scraper or our peace of mind." We drank to that, and the party continued into the night. Later, after everyone had gone home and I was cleaning up, I found myself thinking about the whole insane journey. It had started with such a small thing, an ice scraper visible on a dashboard. Such a minor, insignificant detail that most people would never even notice. But in Deborah's world, it was grounds for confiscation and fines and harassment. The thing is, it was never really about the ice scraper. It was about power and control. Deborah had spent years building a kingdom where she made the rules and punished anyone who questioned her authority. The ice scraper was just her excuse with me, like the flowers had been with Cheryl or the fence color with someone else. She needed violations to justify her power, so she created them where none existed. When I took my ice scraper back from her porch that morning, I was not just retrieving my property. I was challenging her authority. I was saying, "No, you do not get to do this," and that was unforgivable in her mind. So she escalated and escalated and escalated until she finally crossed enough legal lines that the system had to step in. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a run through the neighborhood. The sun was coming up, painting everything in gold and pink light. I ran past Deborah's house, which now had a for sale sign in the yard. Her family was selling it while she served her sentence. I ran past the community center where we had held that crucial vote of no confidence. I ran past Marcus's house and Janet's house and all the other homes where people had suffered under Deborah's rule and finally found freedom. When I got back to my own house, sweaty and tired, I saw something that made me smile. Someone had left a gift on my front porch. It was a brand new ice scraper still in the package with a note attached. "Just in case you need a backup, thanks for everything. The neighborhood." I laughed and picked it up, carrying it inside. I put it on my kitchen counter where I would see it every day, a reminder of how a small act of standing up for yourself can become something bigger. A reminder that communities are stronger than any one person trying to control them. And a reminder that sometimes the most important battles are fought not over grand principles, but over simple things like the right to keep an ice scraper on your dashboard. Life in Meadowbrook Estates settled into a new rhythm. The HOA still existed, but it operated the way it was supposed to, maintaining common areas, organizing neighborhood events, and dealing with legitimate issues like broken streetlights or needed repairs. Cheryl was a good president, focused on serving rather than ruling. The board actually listened to residents and made decisions that benefited everyone. I never saw Deborah again. I heard she got early release after serving 10 months for good behavior, but she moved out of state afterward. Her attorney told the press she was getting therapy and trying to understand why she had behaved the way she did. I hoped that was true. I did not hate her. I pitied her. She had spent so much energy trying to control everything around her that she had destroyed her own life in the process. As for me, I kept working at the hospital, kept living in my house, and kept that ice scraper on my dashboard through every winter. It became something of a neighborhood joke. People would drive by and honk, pointing at it and laughing. I did not mind. It was a symbol of freedom, of the right to live without fear of petty tyranny. Sometimes when I scraped ice off my windshield on cold mornings, I thought about that moment when Deborah tried to confiscate it. I thought about how I could have just let her take it, paid the fine, and tried to keep my head down like Cheryl had done. But I also thought about what would have happened if I had. She would have kept escalating with me, just like she had with everyone else. And the neighborhood would still be living under her thumb. Standing up to bullies is never easy. It is exhausting and stressful and sometimes dangerous. But it is necessary, because bullies rely on people backing down. They rely on fear and intimidation keeping everyone in line. When someone finally says no and means it, when someone finally gathers evidence and demands accountability, the whole structure crumbles. I hope that someone else dealing with an abusive HOA or a petty tyrant in their own life would hear this story and find the courage to fight back. Not with anger or revenge, but with documentation and persistence and the law. That is how you beat bullies, not by becoming one yourself, but by exposing them to the light of accountability. On the 1-year anniversary of the ice scraper incident, the neighborhood threw a party. Cheryl declared it Ice Scraper Day, and everyone was supposed to bring their ice scraper and tell a funny story about winter or cars, or dealing with difficult people. It was silly and wonderful and exactly the kind of thing a healthy community does. Marcus gave a speech about how communities work best when people look out for each other instead of looking down on each other. Janet presented me with a plaque that read, "In honor of Harrison O'Brien, who stood up for all of us." I hung it in my garage, right next to where I kept my ice scraper. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat in my living room with a glass of whiskey and allowed myself to feel proud. I had moved to Meadowbrook Estates broken from my divorce, looking for a fresh start. Instead, I had found a fight I never wanted. But I had also found neighbors who became friends. I had found my own strength, and I had helped free an entire community from someone who had terrorized them for years, all because I refused to let someone steal my ice scraper. It sounds absurd when you say it like that. It sounds like the kind of petty dispute that mature adults should be able to resolve with a simple conversation. And maybe in a healthy situation, it would have been. But Deborah had created a system where nothing was simple, where every interaction was a power play, where kindness was seen as weakness. Breaking that system required someone willing to fight. It required evidence and lawyers and court dates and testimony. It required other people finding their own courage and coming forward with their stories. It required a prosecutor willing to take the case seriously, and a judge willing to impose real consequences. It required all of those things coming together at the right time. But it started with me walking up to Deborah's porch and taking back what was mine. That one small act of defiance set everything else in motion. It showed other people that resistance was possible. It gave Deborah enough rope to hang herself with her escalating harassment. It created the documentation trail that would eventually lead to criminal charges. I learned something important through all of this. Never underestimate the power of saying no. Never underestimate the importance of standing up for yourself, even over something small. Because it is never really about the small thing. It is about respect and dignity and the right to live without fear. Those things are worth fighting for. My ice scraper still sits on my dashboard every winter. It is worn now, the foam grip faded, the blade slightly scratched. But it works perfectly, just like it always has. Every time I use it to clear ice from my windshield before heading to work on a cold morning, I remember everything that happened. I remember the fear and anger and exhaustion. But I also remember the victory and the community that came together and the friends I made. Most of all, I remember that I did not back down. When someone tried to take something from me, I took it back. When someone tried to intimidate me, I documented it. When someone tried to destroy me, I fought back with the law and with truth. And in the end, justice prevailed. That ice scraper, that simple piece of plastic and foam that my dad gave me years ago, became a symbol of resistance. It became a rallying point for a community tired of being bullied. It became proof that standing up to tyrants, even petty ones, is always worth it. So yes, this is the story of how an HOA president stole my ice scraper and I took it back. But it is also the story of how a neighborhood found its voice. It is the story of how accountability matters. It is the story of how small acts of courage can lead to big changes. And it is the story of why you should never, ever let anyone take what is yours without a fight. These days, when new people move into Meadowbrook Estates, someone always tells them the story of the ice scraper. It has become part of the neighborhood lore, passed down like a legend. Some details get exaggerated in the retelling, but the core message remains the same. This is a community where people stand up for each other. This is a place where bullies do not win. This is a neighborhood that learned the hard way about the importance of accountability and never forgot the lesson. I still live here, still work at the hospital, still scrape ice off my windshield on cold mornings. My life is quiet and peaceful now, exactly what I wanted when I moved here. The HOA functions the way it should. My neighbors are friends. My house is my sanctuary, not a source of stress, and every winter when I reach for that ice scraper I smile, because I know its story. I know what it represents, and I know that I fought for it and won. That is worth more than any pristine dashboard or perfect compliance with absurd rules. That is worth everything.